There is a place on this earth that does not appear on any public map. It has no address. It has no sign above the door. Most governments will not confirm it exists, and the ones that do will tell you almost nothing about what happens inside. But if the unthinkable ever happens, if the missiles leave their silos and the world begins to burn, the people who shape the fate of nations will not be standing in the open. They will vanish. And they will vanish into a system of facilities so deeply buried, so heavily fortified, and so carefully prepared that they could survive the end of civilization as we know it. Today we are going inside those places, the secret bunkers, the continuity programs, the hidden networks built for one single terrifying purpose, to keep the machinery of government alive when the world above is destroyed. And what you are about to learn will change the way you see every news headline, every military exercise, and every world leader standing at a podium looking calm. Because beneath that calm, there is an infrastructure of survival that has been quietly expanding for decades. And it is more sophisticated, more secretive, and more chilling than almost anything you have ever imagined. Before we go any further, if you are the kind of person who wants to understand what is really happening behind the headlines, subscribe right now. Most people scroll past this and never come back. Do not be that person. Hit subscribe and stay with us, because this story goes very, very deep. Let us start with a number. Not a flashy number, a quiet one that most people have never heard, and that almost no government official will say out loud. In the United States alone, there are believed to be more than 100 underground government facilities of significant scale. Some of them are old. Some of them were built during the Cold War when nuclear annihilation felt like it was one miscommunication away. Some of them have been quietly upgraded in the last 20 years, with technology that makes the original Cold War bunkers look like storm shelters. And the United States is not alone. Russia has an entire underground city beneath Moscow. China has been digging for decades. The United Kingdom has a network of facilities stretching from London deep into the countryside. And those are just the ones we can partially confirm. The real picture, the full scope of what exists beneath the surface of this earth, is something that no public document has ever fully captured. Because the people who built these places intended them to stay secret, and in most cases, they have succeeded. So let us begin at the beginning. Let us begin with why. The logic of the bunker is brutally simple. A nuclear weapon, detonated over a capital city, kills everyone in the open. It kills them with the blast, it kills them with the heat, it kills them with the radiation that lingers for days and weeks after the fireball fades. In the early years of the nuclear age, governments looked at this reality and made a decision that was cold and rational and deeply unsettling. They decided that the most important people needed to survive, not because those people were more valuable as human beings, but because without a functioning command authority, a surviving population has no coordination, no military direction, no nuclear response capability, and no ability to negotiate an end to a conflict. Without leadership, a nation that survives a first strike cannot respond, cannot recover, and cannot prevent the next one. So they started digging. And they never really stopped. The first major program in the United States was formalized in the early 1950s. The Eisenhower administration looked at the Soviet nuclear program, which had successfully tested its first atomic bomb in 1949, and concluded that American government continuity required more than good intentions. It required concrete. Lots of it. Buried deep beneath rock and mountain, with blast doors thick enough to absorb the shockwave of a nearby nuclear detonation, and air filtration systems capable of scrubbing radioactive particles from the atmosphere for months at a time. What emerged from that era was a philosophy that shaped everything that followed, the philosophy of continuity of government. And that philosophy has never been abandoned. Continuity of government is the formal framework under which the United States and most major world powers maintain plans to preserve executive, legislative, and military authority during and after a catastrophic attack. It covers everything: who is in the chain of command, where they go when the alert sounds, what communication systems they use, how long they can operate in isolation, what the legal authorities are for declaring a successor government, how the nuclear arsenal is controlled when the president cannot be reached. All of it is written down in documents that carry the highest classification designations in existence. And at the center of all of it, holding the whole framework together, are the bunkers. Now let us talk about the most famous one, because even though the United States government spent decades denying its existence, the story eventually came out, and what it revealed was staggering. beneath a luxury resort in the mountains of West Virginia, in a facility that operated for nearly 40 years without the public knowing what it truly was. The United States government maintained a secret underground bunker large enough to house the entire United States Congress. Not just a few key leaders, not just the president and the cabinet, the entire legislative branch of the American government, senators, representatives, staff, everyone needed to keep the Congress functioning after a nuclear attack. The resort was called the Greenbrier. It sits in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, in a valley surrounded by the Allegheny Mountains. For decades, it welcomed presidents, celebrities, and wealthy guests who came to enjoy its golf courses, its spa, and its famous cuisine. And beneath it, access through a tunnel entrance hidden behind a set of large decorative doors in one of the resort's exhibition halls, was a facility that could have changed the course of human history. The bunker was codenamed Project Greek Island. Construction began in 1958. It was completed in 1962, just in time for the Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the world closer to nuclear war than almost any moment before or since. The facility stretched across approximately 112,000 square feet. It contained 18 dormitories capable of housing all 535 members of Congress, plus essential support staff. It had a clinic, a cafeteria, a television broadcast studio for delivering emergency communications to any surviving American population, a power plant, a water treatment system, and enough food and supplies to sustain its population for 60 days. The blast doors that sealed the entrance were designed to withstand a nuclear detonation within a close proximity. The walls and critical sections were reinforced with multiple feet of concrete. The entire facility was built on large springs, designed to absorb the mechanical shock of a nearby explosion without collapsing the structure. And the cover story was extraordinary in its simplicity. The government told the resort that the construction project was a new wing of exhibition and conference space. Workers who were brought in to build the classified sections were employees of a private company that held a government contract, and they were sworn to secrecy under arrangements that held for nearly 30 years. The resort staff who worked near the facility every day had no idea what was beneath their feet. The West Virginia elite who attended events in the same building had no idea either. It was one of the most successful secrets in American peacetime history. And it held until 1992, when a reporter named Ted Gupp published a story in the Washington Post that revealed the entire program. Once the secret was out, the government declassified Project Greek Island, opened it briefly for tours, and announced that it was no longer operationally viable as a continuity facility. Because once the location was known to the public, it was of course known to adversaries. The whole value of the bunker was its secrecy, and the secrecy was gone. But here is what that story teaches us. If one facility of that scale could operate for nearly 40 years without the public knowing, completely hidden beneath a functioning luxury resort that welcomed visitors from around the world, what does that tell us about what else exists right now, today, that we do not know about? The answer is a great deal, and we are going to talk about it. Let us talk about Raven Rock. Because while the Greenbrier was housing the legislative branch, the executive branch had its own mountain. Site R. That is the official designation. The full name is the Raven Rock Mountain Complex, and it sits near the Pennsylvania and Maryland border, carved into the granite of Raven Rock Mountain about 6 miles from the more famous Camp David. It is sometimes called the Underground Pentagon. That nickname is not an exaggeration. The facility is enormous. It was constructed beginning in 1951 and has been continuously expanded and upgraded ever since. It contains multiple freestanding buildings inside the mountain, not just rooms carved from rock, but actual separate structures built within the excavated interior, each one isolated on its own set of shock-absorbing mounts. The facility has its own power generation, its own water supply drawn from underground sources, its own fuel storage, its own communication systems, and its own defensive perimeter. It is designed to function as a fully operational military command center during and after a nuclear exchange. Raven Rock is operated by the Department of Defense and in wartime would serve as an alternate command post for the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Pentagon above ground is a target. It has been a target since the first Soviet nuclear warheads were pointed at American cities. The people who planned American nuclear strategy understood that if the Pentagon were destroyed in a first strike, the entire military command structure could collapse. Raven Rock exists to prevent that. It exists so that even after Washington burns, someone in a uniform with the proper authority can still pick up a phone that still works and give orders to a surviving military force. The facility has been cited in government documents over the years, referenced in congressional testimony, and described in books by journalists and former officials. One of the most detailed accounts came from journalist Garrett Graff, whose book Raven Rock examined the entire continuity of government infrastructure in remarkable detail. What Graff found was a system of extraordinary complexity, one that had consumed billions of dollars over decades, that had its own internal bureaucracy, its own career tracks for the military and civilian officials assigned to it, and its own deeply strange culture of people who spent years preparing for an event they hoped would never come, but could not afford to be unprepared for. And then there is the most famous bunker in American history, the one that the whole world knows by name, Mount Weather. Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center sits in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, near a small town called Bluemont. It is operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and it serves as the primary relocation site for the executive branch of the United States government, including the President, the Vice President, the Cabinet, the Supreme Court, and senior officials from dozens of federal agencies. If the alert sounds and the President needs to leave Washington, Mount Weather is one of the primary destinations. The facility has both an above-ground component, which handles some non-classified emergency management functions, and a massive underground installation that was constructed beginning in the 1950s and has been continuously modernized ever since. What is known about the underground facility at Mount Weather is that it includes everything a functioning government would need to survive and operate for an extended period. There are living quarters for essential personnel. There are offices and conference rooms. There is a broadcast studio. There is a complete medical facility. There are independent power, water, and air systems. There is enough storage to sustain operations for a significant period without any resupply from the surface. And there is a communications infrastructure that can connect Mount Weather to military command posts, to surviving civilian government facilities, and to what remains of the outside world. But here is what makes Mount Weather particularly significant in the history of American emergency planning. It is not just a bunker. It is a shadow government, permanently staffed, always ready, with its own set of officials who mirror the positions of the visible government above ground. During the September 11th attacks in 2001, when American airspace was shut down and no one knew if more attacks were coming, key members of the cabinet and senior officials were flown or driven to Mount Weather. It activated. It went from standby to operational. And for a period of hours, a substantial portion of the United States government was sitting underground in the Blue Ridge Mountains, running the country from inside a mountain, while the world above tried to understand what had just happened. That moment in 2001 was the most public glimpse most Americans have ever had of the continuity system actually working in real time. And even then, most people did not fully grasp what they were seeing. Now let us go deeper. Because the United States is not the only nation that has built for the end of the world. Let us talk about what Russia has been doing underground, because the scale of what Russia has constructed beneath its territory is something that should change the way everyone understands the strategic balance between the great powers. Beneath Moscow, there is a city. Not a metaphorical city, an actual city, with streets, with rail lines, with facilities that can house tens of thousands of people, with its own independent infrastructure completely separate from the surface world above it. This underground network has multiple names in various documents and reports. The one that appears most often in Western analyses is Metro 2. The Russian government has never officially acknowledged Metro 2's existence, but former Russian officials, Western intelligence assessments, and investigative journalists have pieced together enough to establish that it is real, that it connects the Kremlin to multiple sites of strategic importance across Moscow, that it extends beneath the Moscow River, and that it links to facilities outside the city, designed for government relocation in the event of a nuclear attack. But Metro 2 is only part of the picture. The larger Russian continuity program centers on a facility that has been described as the most impressive piece of military engineering on the planet, Yamantau Mountain. Located in the southern Ural Mountains, Yamantau is a large granite peak that Russian authorities have spent decades hollowing out. Construction at Yamantau has been ongoing since at least the 1990s, and possibly earlier. At its peak, Western intelligence estimates suggested that tens of thousands of workers were engaged in construction activity at the site simultaneously. The scale of excavation, the volume of material removed from the mountain, and the infrastructure built to support the construction effort all point to a facility of enormous size. American officials raised the Yamantau project with Russian counterparts multiple times during the 1990s, when the two countries had a somewhat more open relationship and received answers that were unsatisfying and contradictory. Russian officials at different times described Yamantau as a mining project, a food storage facility, a repository for national treasures, and a disaster response center. None of those explanations fully accounted for the scale of what was clearly being built. What most Western analysts believe, based on the available evidence, is that Yamantau is the Russian government's primary wartime relocation facility, the place where the President of Russia, the senior military leadership, and the key elements of the Russian nuclear command structure would go if war were imminent. It is built to survive not just a nuclear strike, but a sustained nuclear campaign. Its depth, its granite construction, and the scale of its engineering all point to a facility designed to endure conditions that would be unsurvivable anywhere on the surface of the Earth. And Russia has not stopped at Yamantau. The Russian military has invested heavily in a concept called the Dead Hand, which the Russians call Perimeter, a semi-autonomous nuclear launch system designed to ensure that Russia can respond to a nuclear attack even if every human being in the Russian military command structure has been killed. If the system detects the conditions of a nuclear strike and cannot reach Russian command authorities after a set period, it can launch nuclear missiles automatically. It is the ultimate continuity of force system, a machine that carries on the war after the people who started it are gone. And it is believed to still be operational today. The existence of systems like Perimeter tells us something important about the logic of the bunker and the logic of nuclear deterrence more broadly. The bunker is not just about keeping leaders alive so they can make good decisions. The bunker is about ensuring that an adversary cannot win by simply killing the leadership. As long as a command authority survives, as long as someone with the authority and ability to order a nuclear response is alive underground in a mountain somewhere, the calculus of a first strike remains unfavorable. You cannot win the war by killing the president if there are 12 other people in line behind the president, all of them sitting in reinforced bunkers spread across 3,000 miles of mountain ranges. The bunker is deterrence. The bunker is the thing that makes the first strike not worth it. And that is exactly why the people who built these facilities wanted them to be known about, at least in general terms, while keeping the specific locations and capabilities secret. Now let us cross the Atlantic. Because the United Kingdom has its own deep history with underground survival infrastructure, and it is a history that goes all the way back to the Second World War. During the Blitz, when German bombers were destroying London night after night, the British government discovered something that would shape its thinking for decades. Underground facilities worked. The cabinet war rooms, the network of basement offices beneath Westminster from which Winston Churchill directed the British war effort, proved that government could function underground under conditions of sustained attack. When the nuclear age arrived and the threat grew from conventional bombs to weapons capable of destroying an entire city with a single detonation, the British government took the lessons of the Blitz and scaled them up enormously. The result was a program that produced multiple tiers of underground facilities across the United Kingdom, designed to maintain government function at the national level and at the regional level simultaneously. The most significant national facility was a site known by several names over the years, but most commonly referenced as the Burlington Bunker, or the Central Government War Headquarters, or simply by its location, Corsham in Wiltshire. Burlington was one of the largest underground facilities ever constructed in Britain. Carved into existing limestone mines beneath a small town in southwest England, it stretched across 35 acres of underground space. It contained offices for up to 4,000 government workers, dormitories, a BBC broadcast studio from which the Prime Minister could address any surviving population, a hospital, a pub, a hairdresser, and enough supplies to sustain operations for 3 months. Burlington was designed to receive the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the senior military leadership, and the essential civil service officials needed to run a wartime government. Like the Greenbrier in America, Burlington was eventually declassified after its operational usefulness ended. The government publicly acknowledged the facility in 2004, and it is now maintained as a historical site. But as with the American case, the declassification of old facilities tells us nothing about what is operational today. The United Kingdom government does not confirm the locations or capabilities of its current continuity facilities. What analysts and researchers can say with confidence is that the capability almost certainly still exists in some form, upgraded and relocated to sites that have not been publicly disclosed. There is also the matter of what happens to the British royal family in a wartime scenario. The monarchy is a significant element of British national identity and constitutionally significant as well. And British emergency planning has historically included provisions for the safety and relocation of senior royals. During the Cold War, plans existed to evacuate the royal family to various secure locations, and while the specific current arrangements are not publicly known, the framework that would protect the institution of the monarchy in a national emergency almost certainly still exists in some form. Let us now talk about China. Because China's approach to underground military infrastructure is unlike any other nation on Earth, and it represents one of the most significant military construction programs in modern history. China has been building underground tunnels and facilities for military purposes on a scale that is extraordinary even by the standards of the Cold War superpowers. The program that has received the most attention in Western military analysis is a network of tunnels maintained by the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, the branch of the Chinese military that controls China's nuclear arsenal. This tunnel network has been referred to in various reports as the Underground Great Wall. American intelligence and academic researchers who have studied the available satellite imagery and public Chinese sources estimate that the tunnel network could stretch for thousands of miles. It connects launch facilities, command posts, storage depots, and hardened bunkers across a vast area of central and western China. The purpose is the same as every other underground military program: survivability. Ensure that no matter what a potential adversary does on the surface, the capability to respond survives beneath the ground. But China's underground ambitions go beyond the nuclear forces. The country has invested heavily in hardened underground facilities for government leadership continuity, for military command and control, and for the protection of critical infrastructure during wartime. Chinese cities, particularly Beijing, have extensive underground networks including civil defense tunnels designed to shelter large civilian populations as well as government and military personnel. These systems have been expanded and modernized as China's military posture has grown more assertive and as its assessment of potential threats has shifted. What makes the Chinese case particularly interesting from a strategic standpoint is that China has pursued a nuclear doctrine called minimum deterrence, which holds that a relatively small nuclear force is sufficient to deter attack, as long as that force can survive a first strike and respond. The hardened underground facilities are central to this doctrine. They make the Chinese nuclear force survivable. They ensure that a potential attacker cannot destroy all of China's nuclear capability with a first strike, no matter how sophisticated that strike might be. And they give Chinese leadership a place to function during a nuclear exchange, maintaining command and control when it matters most. Now let us step back and look at the global picture, because what we have described so far, the American bunkers, the Russian mountain complexes, the British underground facilities, and the Chinese tunnel networks, all of it points to a single inescapable conclusion. Every major nuclear power on Earth has built an underground world for its leadership. Every government that has faced the serious possibility of nuclear war has come to the same conclusion. Some people must survive, and survival requires going underground. And all of these programs taken together reveal something about the world we actually live in, the world beneath the world that most people go through their entire lives never thinking about. Let us now get specific about what life inside one of these facilities would actually look like. Because the question is not just where world leaders would go, the question is what their existence would be like once they got there. And the answer is far stranger and more psychologically demanding than most people imagine. Consider the logistics of a full activation. An alert comes in, the intelligence is confirmed, launch detection systems have tracked incoming warheads. The window for evacuation is minutes. In the United States, the protocol for presidential evacuation involves a series of overlapping options. Marine One, the presidential helicopter, can be airborne from the south lawn of the White House in minutes, carrying the president and essential staff to a relay point. From there, the president can transfer to Air Force One for a longer journey or be transported by ground to a closer facility. There is also an airborne command post, the E-4B Nightwatch aircraft, which is a heavily modified Boeing 747 capable of serving as a flying command center for the President and the Secretary of Defense. One E-4B is on ground alert 24 hours a day, meaning it is fueled, staffed, and ready to launch at any hour. In the ultimate emergency, the President and the continuity staff could run the country from the air indefinitely, as long as the aircraft can refuel from tanker aircraft that are also maintained on continuous alert. But if the scenario is serious enough and prolonged enough, eventually the people at the top of government end up underground. And underground, the conditions are survivable, but they are not comfortable. They are not normal. They are something that very few human beings have ever experienced, and the psychological weight of that experience is something that emergency planners have had to reckon with for decades. Think about what it means to go underground in a nuclear emergency and stay there. You descend into a facility, the blast doors close behind you, and outside those doors, the world you have known your entire life is either already gone or in the process of ending. The people you know who did not make it into the bunker are on the surface. Your family, unless they are part of the continuity program, is on the surface. The cities you have visited, the landscapes you have crossed, the civilization you have spent your life being part of, all of it is being unmade in ways that no document can fully capture and no training exercise can truly prepare you for. And inside the bunker, you have a job to do. Decisions have to be made. Communications have to be maintained. The military still needs direction. Whatever is left of the civilian government still needs to function. The machinery of power does not stop simply because the world above has ended. The people who staff these facilities, who work in the continuity programs, who spend their careers preparing for the day they hope never comes, describe a particular kind of psychological pressure that has no equivalent in normal professional life. On one hand, there is the urgency of potential crisis, the constant awareness that everything they do exists in the shadow of catastrophe. On the other hand, there is the surreal normalcy of daily work in a facility that is, during peacetime, just an office underground. People go to meetings, they process paperwork, they run exercises, they eat lunch, and all of it is preparation for an event whose full reality, whose actual human cost, cannot be simulated or practiced. You can simulate decision-making, you can simulate communications, you can simulate the logistics of shelter operations. You cannot simulate watching civilization end. And the people in these facilities, if the real thing ever happened, would have to do that while still performing their jobs at the highest level. There is also the question of time. The Cold War bunkers were generally designed for 30 to 60 days of autonomous operation. The assumption was that after that period, either a ceasefire would have been achieved or conditions on the surface would have stabilized enough to allow some form of limited surface activity. But the strategic reality of a full-scale nuclear exchange is that the aftermath, the radiation, the nuclear winter, the collapse of food systems and infrastructure, the breakdown of social order, could last far longer than any initial facility supply estimate. Modern continuity planning has grappled with this problem. The answer has been to build deeper, stock more, and create facilities that can sustain operations for longer periods. But the fundamental tension remains. The people inside the bunker cannot stay underground forever. At some point, they have to come up. And what they find when they do is not something any planning document can fully prepare them for. Now let us talk about something that most discussions of bunkers and continuity planning tend to gloss over: the question of legitimacy. Who has the authority to give orders when the established government has been partially or completely destroyed? This is not just a legal question, it is a deeply practical one. Because in the chaos of a nuclear attack, the chain of command, the established hierarchy of authority that makes government function, can be severed in ways that are not clean or predictable. The United States has the Presidential Succession Act, which establishes a line of succession through the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, the President pro tempore of the Senate, and then through the Cabinet in a specific order. Continuity planning ensures that members of the line of succession are dispersed to different locations so that a single strike cannot kill everyone in the line at once. The concept is called the designated survivor, and it has become familiar to most Americans through news coverage of State of the Union addresses, when one cabinet member is always held back from attending the event in case something catastrophic happens to the Capitol while the rest of the government is gathered there. But the full continuity program is much more elaborate than a single designated survivor. It involves a cascading system of relocations, backup command posts, and pre-delegated authorities that can sustain government function even if the first 30 or 40 people in the line of succession are unreachable. Russia has its own succession and command continuity arrangements, though they are far less publicly documented than the American system. What is known is that the Russian Nuclear Command Authority, the ability to authorize the use of nuclear weapons, is designed to survive even in the most catastrophic scenarios, including scenarios in which the president cannot be reached. This is part of the logic of systems like Perimeter. The command authority does not die with any one person or even any group of people. It is distributed and hardened, and in some cases automated, precisely to ensure that it can never be fully destroyed by a preemptive strike. Let us now talk about some of the lesser-known but equally significant facilities that round out the global picture of leadership survival infrastructure. In France, the government maintains continuity facilities as part of its independent nuclear deterrent posture. France, unlike the United Kingdom, chose not to fully integrate its nuclear forces into the NATO structure, and as part of that independent deterrent, it has built and maintained the command infrastructure to operate those forces autonomously in a crisis. French continuity facilities are among the most tightly held secrets in the Western intelligence world, with far less publicly available information than exists about their American or British counterparts. In Germany, the legacy of the Cold War produced one of the more unusual continuity facilities in Europe, a massive underground bunker built into a mountain in the Ahr Valley, designed to house the government of West Germany in the event of a Soviet attack. This facility, known officially as the Government Bunker, or Regierungsbunker, was carved into an existing railway tunnel and extended to create a structure stretching for miles, with space for thousands of government officials and military personnel. Like the Greenbrier in Burlington, it was eventually decommissioned and declassified after the Cold War ended, and parts of it have been opened to visitors. But also like those facilities, its decommissioning reflected changed threat assessments, not the abandonment of the underlying concept. German government continuity planning continues in some form, updated for the threat environment of the present era. Israel, given its unique security situation, has invested extraordinarily heavily in underground infrastructure. The Israel Defense Forces maintain an extensive network of hardened facilities. The government has emergency relocation capabilities, and the general culture of civil defense in Israel, which includes mandatory shelter requirements for all new residential construction and a nationwide alert system that can reach virtually every civilian within seconds, reflects a society that has never had the luxury of assuming that the worst will not happen. Israeli continuity planning is among the most operationally serious in the world, shaped by the reality that the country faces existential threats from multiple directions and has no geographic depth to absorb a major military blow. North Korea presents a different kind of picture. The Kim regime has built an extensive underground infrastructure, but its primary purpose seems less focused on government continuity in any conventional sense and more on regime survival and military operational security. North Korea has constructed thousands of underground tunnels and facilities across its territory, many of them designed to shelter military equipment, launch capabilities, and leadership personnel from air attack. The scale of underground construction in North Korea, relative to the size of the country and the size of its economy, is remarkable. It reflects a government that has made underground survivability a core element of its military strategy, precisely because it faces adversaries with overwhelming conventional military superiority and must find ways to offset that superiority. Now let us return to the present moment. Because we have spent considerable time in the history and the geography of these programs, and the question that sits beneath all of it is the one that matters most right now, in the world as it currently exists. What would actually happen if the alert sounded today? Let us walk through it. The scenario does not have to be a full nuclear exchange. Continuity programs can activate in response to a range of scenarios, from a credible nuclear threat to a catastrophic attack on critical infrastructure to a biological event of sufficient scale. But let us take the hardest case. Let us take the scenario these facilities were built for. Let us say the warning comes in. In the United States, the watch officers at the various command posts that monitor for missile launches receive the alert. The detection system, which includes satellites and ground-based radar installations, tracks the inbound threat. The timelines are brutal. A submarine-launched ballistic missile fired from close range could reach Washington in as little as 5 to 10 minutes. An intercontinental ballistic missile from Russia takes approximately 30 minutes from launch to impact. That 30 minutes is the window. Everything that happens in continuity of government planning happens inside that window, or is designed to work even if the window is not used. The president is notified. The military aide who accompanies the president at all times, carrying the nuclear satchel known as the football, is the immediate link to the nuclear command system. The president has options. If there is time, the evacuation protocols activate. Key personnel begin moving to their designated relocation sites. Essential documents, the codes and authorities and communications keys that make government function, are already at those sites. The people who know how to use them are already trained. The constant exercises that continuity programs run year-round have prepared everyone for this moment. And then the 30 minutes is over. Whatever the president decided, whatever orders were given, the consequences begin arriving, the warheads detonate, and the world above begins the process of being unmade. Somewhere underground, in a facility whose exact location will never be published in any open-source document, the people who survived the first strike are still at their stations. The communication systems are still working, at least some of them. The power is still on, the air filtration is running, and there is a job to do. The hardest job in human history, governing in the aftermath of a nuclear war, making decisions with incomplete information, degraded communications, and the full weight of what has happened pressing down on every person in that room. Deciding what to do next, whether and how to respond, how to communicate with surviving populations, how to coordinate with allies who may themselves be in underground facilities having the same conversation, and eventually, at some point that no one can fully predict, deciding when and how to come back up into a world that will be fundamentally, permanently different from the one they went underground to escape. The people inside those bunkers would carry something that no other humans in history have ever carried. The knowledge that they were the last functioning authority of a civilization that had just, in the space of 30 minutes, largely ceased to exist. They would carry that knowledge while performing the most demanding and consequential work imaginable. And they would do it in rooms with no windows, with recycled air, with canned food, with the hum of generators and the flicker of screens, showing them a world in ruins. This is what the bunker is, at its core. Not a luxury retreat. Not a privilege of power in any comfortable sense. It is a duty station. It is the most terrible duty station ever conceived by human minds. And the people who maintain these facilities, who staff them and plan for them and run exercises in them year after year, are in their own way accepting a burden that most people never think about and that most governments prefer not to discuss in public. There is one more dimension to this story that deserves attention. The moral dimension. Because the existence of these facilities raises questions that do not have easy answers, and that have been debated seriously by ethicists, military planners, and political philosophers since the nuclear age began. Who decides who goes into the bunker? The resources for underground survival are finite. Even the largest facilities can only hold so many people. The selection of who is designated as essential personnel, who receives a relocation order when the alert comes, who gets a seat in the facility, and who does not, is one of the most consequential decisions any government makes. And it is a decision that is made in advance, in classified documents, by people who will never have to publicly justify the criteria they used. The general principle that has guided most continuity programs is functional. The people who go into the bunker are the people needed to make the government function. Decision makers, technical specialists, communications experts, the people whose specific knowledge and authority are necessary to coordinate a response and begin a recovery. This is a logical principle. It is not the same as a just principle, because it means that the people most likely to survive the initial catastrophe are the people who were already at the top of the hierarchy. The powerful survive. The ordinary do not. In a society that professes to value the equal dignity of every human life, the bunker represents a choice that no one likes to look at directly, but that every government with a continuity program has made. There are people who have argued that the bunker itself is immoral, that a system designed to preserve leadership while abandoning the general population is a system that prioritizes power over people. That resources spent on underground facilities for governments should instead be spent on civil defense infrastructure that could protect broader populations. These arguments have been made seriously by serious people, and they deserve to be taken seriously. At the same time, there is a counter-argument that is also serious. Without a functioning government authority, a surviving population has no coordination mechanism, no military direction, no ability to communicate or organize on the national scale that recovery would require. The bunker preserves not just individuals but institutions, and institutions, even imperfect ones, are what make recovery possible. Neither side of that argument wins cleanly. The moral reality of the bunker is as complex as the political reality of nuclear weapons themselves. Both exist because of the world we have built. Both are symptoms of a strategic environment that humanity has not yet found a way to escape, and both will continue to define the secret architecture of global power for as long as that environment persists. Let us end with this. Right now, as you are watching this, somewhere in West Virginia, or the mountains of Pennsylvania, There are people at work in facilities you will never visit, maintaining systems you will never see, running exercises that simulate scenarios you hope never come to pass. There are similar people in Russia, sitting in facilities beneath mountains in the Urals, doing the same. In China, in the United Kingdom, in France, in Israel, in facilities whose names will never appear in any public document. There are professionals whose careers are dedicated entirely to the proposition that civilization must survive even its own worst impulses. That even in the absolute worst scenario, even when the unthinkable has happened, some thread of organized human authority must remain to hold the remaining pieces together. That is what the bunker is, ultimately. Not just a physical structure, not just concrete and blast doors and air filtration systems. It is an argument that civilization is worth preserving, that the institutions of government, flawed and imperfect as they are, represent something worth protecting, that the chain of command matters, even when the world above it is on fire. And that somewhere, in a room with no windows, with recycled air and fluorescent lighting and the weight of everything on its shoulders, a government can keep going, keep deciding, keep trying to do the impossible work of managing the aftermath of the unmanageable, not because anyone wanted to be there, but because someone had to be. These facilities exist in the shadows of public knowledge. They are funded by black budgets and classified appropriations. They are staffed by people who cannot talk about their work. They are maintained with a quiet diligence that the public almost never sees and almost never thinks about. But they are real. They are operational. And in the calculus of global power in the 21st century, they matter in ways that shape the decisions of every government and every military planner, every single day, even in times of apparent peace. The next time you see a world leader at a summit, standing in front of cameras and flags, looking confident and in control, remember this. Somewhere in the plans they carry with them, somewhere in the classified annexes of the national security documents they have read and the briefings they have sat through, there is a set of instructions for where they go when that confidence is no longer enough. There is a location, a tunnel entrance, a blast door, a set of coordinates that represent their personal exit from the world as it is and their entry into the world as it might become. That location is the most closely guarded secret in their government's possession, and it has been prepared, maintained, and kept ready for decades, against the day that no one wants to come, and that everyone in a position of power must prepare for regardless. The bunker waits. It has always waited, and it will go on waiting, deep in its mountain, or its hillside, or its hollowed-out valley, in the silence beneath the surface of the world we think we know. If this story changed the way you think about what is happening beneath the surface of global power, hit the like button right now. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it before you scroll away. There are more stories like this one, stories about the hidden infrastructure of power, the systems and facilities and programs that shape the world without ever appearing on the nightly news. You will not find them anywhere else presented the way they are here. Subscribe, stay with us, because this is only the beginning.